presentation. So in today's agenda, we'll be discussing things like what is a vader, and how to identify vaders, some general pointers, and some of the groups in vaders that we're going to look at are thickneys, plovers, sandpipers, pratincoles. And we're going to, towards the end of the presentation, we're going to look at identification of the vaders, and then we are going to conclude with the summary of the presentation. Follows like my previous presentations, and for those who have not been part of my previous presentations, I'll share the links to the previous identification series that we have done in the past, so for your benefit. So so I think I'd request all of you to please be on mute, and then you can unmute yourself towards the end of the presentation, just for the benefit of all the participants on the call right now. So as a disclaimer, I'd like to have this is an extremely simplified approach. This is for aimed at beginners who are overwhelmed with vaders, and we only are going to cover the most commonly seen vaders, and we're going to look at some rarities, but mostly common birds. We don't cover snipes. Snipes are a topic by itself. We'll probably cover it in a future session because snipes are quite challenging. And most of the pictures that I've used in this presentation are my own. There are a few pictures I've taken it off the internet. I've put the credits along with the pictures itself, but otherwise most of the pictures are my own. So first of all, we need to develop an understanding of what is a vader. Vader is a word used by British birdwatchers or British ornithologists, and the equivalent term used by Americans is the shorebirds. So vaders or shorebirds, they are all belonging to the order Charadriiformes, and so they're typically called vaders because they are commonly formed wading along shorelines and mudflats in order to forage for food, crawling and burrowing in the mud or sand. So this is how they feed, and they usually seen along the shorelines and sometimes in the water also. So that's why they called vaders. So if you look at vaders, I think the first number one thing that we need to identify first in the field is that whether it's a sandpiper or a plover. So sandpiper has typically a longer beak in proportion to its head, and a plover is something which has a very short beak, and a plover is also something which has larger eyes, and sandpiper in relation to the head, it has smaller eyes. So why this difference is critical is because the way in which these two group of birds find their food. Plovers are typically birds which are visual feeders. They see their food and then they pick it. Whereas sandpipers, what they do is they are tactile feeders, because tactile feeders in the sense they need to feel the food before they can actually see it. So they can actually eat it. So they probe the sand and they go at different depths of the sand to get different kinds of food. So that's how the plovers and sandpipers are different. So I think this difference will be very critical when we go into this presentation. So other things that we generally need to look for in the field is that
नीचे आ गए होटल में काल निकला.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry, I just needed to mute a few people. Excuse me. So the other things that we need to look at the birds is the size of the bird, whether it's a small bird or a medium-sized bird or a large bird. The color of the legs are very critical in typically trying to identify waders. The shape of the beak, whether it's a straight beak, it's a curved beak, upturned beak, or a down curved beak, all that will be very critical. Some of the upper body markings, breast band, eye ring, all these features would be very critical in identifying some of the difficult species. So let's get into the presentation now. So first, I think we'll get start with the easier ones. We'll start with this group called the thickneys. So we have like typically two thickneys which are widespread: the Indian thickney and the great thickney. Now, the both these birds, the Indian thickney and the great thickney, are found, they're across India, and it's actually quite easy to tell them apart. So don't really need a field guide or somebody to tell you. So the Indian thickney is slightly smaller in size when compared to the great thickney. It has like a lot of streaks on its upper body, whereas the great thickney does not have so many markings or streaks on the upper body. It has like a much plainer looking upper body, but the facial markings are very prominent in the great thickney. But looking at both of these birds, you can tell them that they're closely related species. Yeah. So we did not spend much time on thickneys because thickneys is a group of birds which are easily told apart in the field. You don't need much help in identifying these birds in the field or telling them apart. They're very unique looking birds, mostly nocturnal habit, but Indian thickney is mostly nocturnal. They're slightly sluggish during the daytime. Great thickneys are active during the daytime as well. So when a bird is nocturnal, you can tell it with the eyes itself. The eyes are like, usually larger in proportion to its head when compared to the birds which are active during daytime. So so that's about the thickneys. Let's move on to the next species, which is the plovers. Plovers, as I said earlier, plovers are like visual feeders. So their eyes are very prominent. They see their food before they're taking it, and so they are. The other thing about plovers is that, as I said, they are like visual feeders, and they need to see their food before they take it, and they have like a relatively shorter beaks when compared to the sandpipers. So when coming to plovers, we have the lesser sand plover and the greater sand plover, and in fact it's like in the field it's quite difficult to tell them apart from a distance. But when you observe them through your binoculars or your cameras, what you can see is that lesser sand plover has like dark legs, whereas the greater sand plover has like yellow legs. And this is the important point that we need to keep in mind to tell these birds apart. Of course, like you also have like the beak shape. The greater sand plover has like a slightly longer and thicker beak when compared to the lesser sand plover. So the color of the legs and the shape and the thickness of the beak are the two important criteria that you use to eliminate and differentiate between the two plovers. Color of the legs and the thickness and the length of the beak. So another closely related species, almost like very similar in size also to the lesser slant plover. It's slightly smaller, and also very similar looking bird is the Kentish plover. So how do you differentiate the lesser sand plover and the Kentish plover in the field? So the number one marker in the field is that the lesser sand plover does not have like a neck band. When I say neck band, I mean the white ring that goes around, unbroken white ring is there in the Kentish plover, and whereas the lesser sand plover does not have like a unbroken neck ring. So this is the main differentiating factor between lesser sand plover and a Kentish plover. So another very closely in terms of size, very similar kind of a size to the Kentish plover is the little ringed plover. And how do you tell apart the Kentish plover and the little ringed plover? Sometimes a challenge because like in the non-breeding plumage, they resemble each other. So in fact, both these birds have that unbroken neck band. But if you look at the eye ring, the little ringed plover has like a very prominent eye ring, yellow color eye ring around its eyes, which is absent in the Kentish plover. And the other thing about the little ringed plover is that it has like a very prominent unbroken breast band, which is also seen in the non-breeding plumages. But in the Kentish plover, if you see, in the non-breeding plumages, the breast band is broken. So it has like a very unbroken neck band, but the breast band is broken. So that's how you tell a Kentish plover from a little ringed plover. A very similar looking species to the little ringed plover is the common ringed plover. Common ringed plover is relatively rarer, but then we need to be aware of how to differentiate between the two species, the little ringed plover and the common ringed plover. So the neck band is unbroken in both the birds. Both the birds have like unbroken breast band also. The only difference between the two species is that the in the field is that the little ringed plover will have like a yellow eye ring, whereas it is absent in the common ringed plover. So this is the main difference between the two species. So another very rare bird which is seen in our shorelines is the Caspian plover. So the Caspian plover, the main thing is that it has like a very slim, long beak when compared to the rest of the plovers. And the other thing is like it shows a very prominent, very bright white kind of a supercilium, which is not there in this picture. But generally, like when you see a Caspian plover, the number one pointer to it is the supercilium. So that would help you identify the Caspian plover in the field. So, so next is actually when you look at large plovers. We have seen all the small plovers, little ring plover. All these are like relatively small. So the medium-sized plovers, we have like two plovers which are often confused in the field. One is the gray plover and the Pacific golden plover. And how do you tell them apart? Because both they have dark legs. Both of them have like, you know, a grayish, very similar kind of marking on the upper body. But the difference is like, you know, the Pacific golden plover has like golden yellow kind of a markings on its upper body. Whereas like in the gray plover, it's like more of gray and white kind of markings on the upper body. So this would be one differentiator. The second differentiator would be the shape of the beak. So in the grey plover, as you can see, the beak is very stout beak, whereas the Pacific golden plover has like a relatively slimmer beak. So, but these both the birds are very similar in size. So it can be a little bit of a challenge, but if you can get some pictures, you can easily identify it in the at your leisure with the help of the markings on the body and also the beak shape. So next in the list is like the sandpipers. How are sandpipers different from plovers? As I said earlier, sandpipers have like a relatively a medium when compared to the plovers, the sandpipers have like a medium length bills. They are tactile feeders, so they need to feel their food before they take it. So their eyes are relatively smaller when compared to the plovers. So that is the main differentiating aspect between plovers and sandpipers. Now let's go into some of the commonly confused waders. One is the common sandpiper and second is the green sandpiper. So, so one differentiating factor between the two is that the common sandpiper has like a very prominent supercilium which extends beyond the eye. Whereas the green sandpiper, the supercilium only extends to the eye, not behind it. That's one important aspect. And second aspect is that if you look at the lower body, in the wings, it short of like in the common sandpiper, there's like a peak-like shape in the wings, which is not there in this green sandpiper. So in fact, the common sandpiper is the only sandpiper which has like this kind of a feature. So this is the main differentiating factor of common sandpiper with all the other sandpipers. Yeah. So this is the you see where the arrow is pointing. That's where the common sandpiper, that a peak-shaped is formed by the wing, which is absent in the green sandpipers. That's how you tell both apart. And so next is like wood sandpiper and the common sandpiper. How do you tell them apart? So the wood sandpiper has like very prominent markings on its upper body, whereas the common sandpiper is relatively plain looking on the upper body. And then again, as I said, like the peak-shaped sign which is there in the common sandpiper is absent in the wood sandpiper. So the upper body markings and the peak-shaped sign formed by the wings are the main differentiating factor between the wood sandpiper and the common sandpiper. The upper body and the shape formed by the wings. So these two would be the main differentiating factors. So, and then coming to the next two species which are very commonly confused, very similar sized sandpipers. One is the Terex sandpiper and the other is the common redshank. So what is why they are confused very frequently is that both have like a reddish legs. Both the Terex sandpiper and the common redshank both have reddish legs, and both have relatively longer beaks when compared to the other sandpipers. So people normally confuse between the two. But the main differentiating factor in the Terex sandpiper is that the beak is curved upwards, the Terex sandpiper, whereas in the common redshank, the beak is quite straight. So you can see the shape of the beak of the Terex sandpiper and the common redshank. That's how you tell them apart. So another very similar kind of confusion exists between the marsh sandpiper and the common greenshank. So these are very commonly confused in the field. And the reason is like, the leg color of the marsh sandpiper, sometimes it looks yellow, sometimes it looks greenish. And depending on the plumage, whether it's a non-breeding or assuming breeding plumage, whatever. And the leg color is very similar. The upper body markings also look very similar. But the main difference between the two species, the marsh sandpiper and the green shank, is that the marsh sandpiper, the beak is very thin and straight, whereas in the common green shank, the beak is quite thick and it's slightly upcurved. Like it's not as upcurved as what you see in the Terex sandpiper, but still there's a small curvature that you can observe in the field. So a combination of these two factors, thickness of the beak and the shape of the beak, that's how you tell the two species apart, the marsh sandpiper and the common green shank. So next, commonly confused species, we have like the curlew sandpiper and the dunlin. So in the non-breeding plumage, in the field, people normally get confused because the leg color is almost the same. The beak also looks similar. The upper body markings also like look fairly similar. But the dunlin is like you normally seen in coastal areas, whereas the curlew sandpiper can also sometimes seen in inland wetlands. So, but the main differentiator between the two is that the curlew sandpiper is the curvature of the beak is almost uniform from the starting to ending point. The curvature is almost uniform, whereas in the dunlin, the beak is almost straight. It only curves at the tip of the beak, and the beak is also relatively smaller in the dunlin when compared to the curlew sandpiper. So this is the main differentiating aspect between curlew sandpiper and the dunlin. And another commonly confused with the redshank is the how do we differentiate the common redshank and the spotted redshank? Because both they have like same color of legs, the beaks are also straight. So how do you differentiate between the two? So in the common redshank, what you can see is the beak is length of the beak is relatively short. It's also quite thick. Whereas in the spotted redshank, beak length is quite long, relatively long when compared to common redshank, and also the beak is also quite thin when compared to the common redshank. So this is how you can differentiate between the two species, the common redshank and the spotted redshank. So coming to little stints, stints are like a fairly smaller sandpipers, and stints are also a common, a source of great confusion. But actually, if you look at some of the pointers, they are fairly easy to tell apart in the field. And we're going to go through each of these pointers. So the first, the little stint, if you look at it, the little stint has like, dark legs. And the Timming stint has like, yellow legs. So this is the main differentiating factor between the two. And the fact that, the little stint has like very prominent markings on its upper body. This little Timming stint has almost like a very plain looking upper body. Color of the legs and the upper body. So a combination of these two factors will help you differentiate between the two species. Another a related species, also source of confusion, is the the long-toed stint. Long-toed stint looks very similar to the little stint, has like very prominent markings on the upper body. It's very similar to the little stint. The only differentiator is that the color of the legs. As with the Temming stint, the long-toed stint also has like yellow color legs. So this is how you can tell apart the little stint and the long-toed stint. The markings on the upper body and the color of the legs. Another commonly confused species is that the little stint and the sanderling both have like relatively very small birds, relatively very similar looking beaks. So how do you tell a little stint from a sanderling? So sanderling actually, like if you look at a sanderling in the field, it looks very bright white when compared to the little stint. But we also need another pointer to help differentiate between the little stint and sanderling. And if you look at the little stint, you can see there's a very small hind toe which is present in the little stint, but this hind toe is absent in the sanderling. So this is how you conclusively eliminate little stint. If you have a picture of a bird on the field, this is how you conclusively eliminate little stint, apart from its like overall paler appearance of the sanderling. So another related species is that sandpiper, which can be confused with other birds, but the main differentiator of a ruff when compared to the rest of the sandpipers is that it has a relatively larger body and a very short beak. So a combination of a larger body and a short beak is only there in the ruff. So that's how you tell a ruff from the other sandpipers. Almost the beak proportion will be like very similar to the stints, but the stints are very small birds. Ruff is like a fairly medium-sized bird. So another confused species, there's a great amount of confusion that exists between the Whimbrel and the curlew. But as with the curlew sandpiper and the dunlin, the main differentiator is that in curlew, the curvature is almost a constant curvature in Whimbrel, whereas in curlew, the curvature is only towards the end. So that's the main differentiator between a Whimbrel and a curlew, apart from the fact that the Whimbrel beak length and the curlew beak length, if you compare, the curlew beak length is also like relatively larger. So this is the main differentiating factor between Whimbrels and curlews, the shape of the beak. So another medium-sized bird that there's a confusion between is the black-tailed godwit and the bar-tailed godwit. Bar-tailed godwit is a relatively rarer bird when compared to the black-tailed godwit. Black-tailed, sometimes you get it in hundreds. Bar-tailed godwit is like very few in numbers. It's also on the decline. So how do you tell about these two birds, the black-tailed and the bar-tailed godwit? Again, it comes to the beak shape. The black-tailed godwit has like a long, straight beak, whereas the bar-tailed godwit has like a slightly upturned beak, like the Turek sandpiper. So bar-tailed godwit has like a slightly upturned beak. So that's how you differentiate between a black-tailed and a bar-tailed godwit. And very unique looking wader, red avocet. You sometimes get it in the coastal wetlands. Doesn't come much in the inland wetlands. So the main, it's a very unique bird which has like very slim, long and upturned beak. There's only one species of Avocet, thankfully. So we don't have any reason for confusion. It's a very unique looking bird. So it doesn't require an identification pointer. So guys, I think the meeting will end in another 2.5 minutes or so. And we have some more slides left. If you want to join and listen to the balance of the slides, if the meeting ends, what I'd request you to do is please log in with the same credentials using the same link, and then we can continue with the meeting. Yeah. So next is like Pratincoles. Pratincoles are very, there are 3 species in the Pratincoles, and I think with Pratincoles we'll conclude the identification of waders. So one is the small Pratincole. Small Pratincole, so there are no, it's actually, it cannot be confused with any other species. So as the name implies, it's fairly small when compared to the oriental and the collared Pratincoles. It has a very unique beak, very short beak. And a lot of people call this the lipstick bird. It looks like the beak, the bird is wearing a lipstick. So we don't really need a identification pointer for a small Pratincole. But the collared Pratincole and the oriental Pratincole are a little difficult to differentiate in the field because they look very similar to each other. So the main differentiating factor between the collared Pratincole and the oriental Pratincole is that the collared Pratincole, in its resting position, the streamers sort of extend beyond the wingtip. Whereas in the oriental Pratincoles, the streamers end much before the wingtip. So this is the main differentiating factor between the collared and the oriental Pratincoles. So that I have like put the summary of the various observations into a concise slide. I'm not going to go into every row. If you want, what I'd suggest you to do is like perhaps you can take a screenshot of this. Anyway, I'll be sharing the recording of this presentation. So it'll help you eliminate a few birds. What you based on your pictures or whatever, or maybe can help you in the field. So, so you can take a screenshot of it. So this is for the plovers. First, you try to determine what's the size of the bird. It's a small bird or a medium-sized bird, and whether it has like a neckband is present or absent, eye ring present or absent. What's the leg color? What's the thickness of the beak? So based on these 4 parameters, you can arrive at like 4 or 5 parameters: the size, the neckband, eye ring, color, beak. You can arrive at what species it is most probable to be. So, and one word of caution I'd like to mention here is that when you look at the leg color, sometimes the leg color might be misleading because the birds are wading in the mud, and the mud will get applied on the legs, and then the leg color may not be like visible. Like when I say pale or orange legs, it may not look so in the field. So you need to look at the other parameters as well. So take a screenshot of this if you want. Otherwise, I can share it later on also. So it can help you identify the different species. This is about the plovers. As I said, plovers, short beaked birds. They are visual feeders, so they have like very prominent eyes in proportion to the rest of the body. So next we come to sandpipers. Again, sandpipers, what is the size of the bird? It's a small bird or a medium sized bird. What's the length of the beak? What is the markings on the body? What is the color of the legs? What is the shape of the beak? Is it straight? It is up curved, down curved, curved at the tip. So a combination of all these 4 things will tell you like what species it is. So this will be a helpful pointer to summarize everything that we have learned so far. So, but I won't be going in detail about each and every one because we have already just done that. So just to quickly to understand, from my understanding, if you want to, what we are going to do is like I'm going to present you with some pictures, and you can try identifying the bird. There's nothing wrong in making a mistake. Waders are very tough to identify. So even if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. So you can unmute yourself at this point and try to participate in the quiz. This is for your own benefit and also to understand whether I have conveyed the ideas correctly. Yeah. So this bird I taken recently in Chambal River in Rajasthan. So anybody wants to?
Thickney, sir.
It's a thickney, yes. But which thickney?
Greater thickney.
Great.
Thickney. Yeah, Gokul sir, I didn't given the right answer. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so great thickney because it has like very prominent markings on the head. Very unique looking bird. You can't mistake this for any other bird. So it's great thickney it is. So yeah, so this bird was photographed in Mandavi beach in Gujarat. So first of all, whether is it a plover or a sandpiper?
Plover.
It's a plover, yeah. So relatively, short beak. Compared to proportionally shorter beak. So which plover could it be?
Small or Kentish?
Kentish or which one is the other thing you said?
Sandplover.
Sand plover.
It doesn't have the complete ring, sir.
Yeah. So it doesn't have like a complete ring. So you're right, very right. So it has to be like a sand plover, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So which sand plover, the lesser or the greater?
Lesser.
I'll go with
Dark.
lesser.
Lesser.
Dark.
Why lesser?
Dark legs.
The beak is small, sir. Legs are yellow.
Eggs are yellow for lesser or greater?
Confused.
Greater.
So actually it has like
Lesser.
so this is the bird here in the picture is like a greater sand plover, and it has like and you can tell that because it has like yellow legs. Yellow legs are prominent, and the beak is also like fairly long and quite thicker when compared to the lesser sand plover. So don't worry about making a mistake. It will take time. We need a lot of time in the field to fine-tune these skills. So no harm in making these mistakes. So so this bird. So which bird is this, a plover or sandpiper first?
Plover.
Plover. Okay. Okay. Is it a sand plover or a?
Ring is incomplete, sir. So I will go with sand plover.
Ring is incomplete. Which ring is incomplete?
The neck ring, sir.
Neck ring is complete.
Neck ring is sorry.
Yes. Neck ring is complete. The breast band is incomplete.
Breastband.
So
And there is no ring around the eyes, sir.
there's no ring around the eye. So what does it? What could it be?
Kentish plover.
Kentish plover. Yeah, so it's
Kentish
definitely
plover.
Kentish plover because it has
Kentish
like
plover.
the broken breastband and complete.
Neckband.
The neckband is complete, the breastband is incomplete. So it has to be a Kentish plover. So this bird,
Excellent.
Little ringed plover.
little ringed plover. Any other answers?
Common plovers.
Kentish.
Common plover. Okay. Kentish.
Kentish.
Little ring
Kentish.
plover. Incomplete. What's this? No, there's no eye ring. Because eye ring is not absent, I'm going with common plover.
Eye ring is there actually. It's
Eye ring is there.
is little ring plover.
The eye ring is there, sir.
Yes, it is little ring.
Yeah, this is
Little
like,
ring.
so I'll help you. This with this bird, this is like a little ringed plover in a non-breeding plumage. So it is the little ringed plover because it has like a eye ring. The neckband is, it has like complete neckband. The breastband looks incomplete, but it's actually complete. I mean, there's like some small differences like in the non-breeding and the breeding plumage, but it's dull at this point, but it doesn't make it incomplete. It is a complete neckband. So combination of complete neckband, complete neck ring and an yellow eye ring. All these three in combination make it a little ringed plover. So we come to this bird. So whether it's a
Green
plover or sandpiper.
Sandpipers.
Sandpiper. So good. So it has like a relatively longer beak, right? So it can't be a plover.
Green sandpaper.
Green sandpiper.
Green
Green
sandpiper. Why not a common sandpiper?
The white beak
It's
on the
not
breast is
mounted
not
there,
there,
it's
and
not
the brow is not, supercilium is not extending beyond the eyes.
Very good, excellent. So yeah, so the supercilium is restricted to the eye, and then it doesn't, and the
Sleep
white
part.
peak, yeah, peak is also not seen.
Yes.
So it's a green sandpiper. But the funny thing about the green sandpiper is like when compared to the common sandpiper and the wood sandpiper, the green sandpiper is not normally seen in large water bodies. Usually seen in like small puddles. So that's something very interesting about the green sandpiper. So next bird. Yeah. So this bird over here.
Marsh sandpiper. Yeah.
No.
Marsh sandpiper.
No.
Common greens.
Yes, sir. No, Marsh sandpiper.
Marsh sandpiper or the common green shank? Which one is
Marsh
it?
sandpiper.
Marsh.
Common,
Yeah, right.
common green shank.
It's not a green shank. It's a marsh
no.
sandpiper, as a couple of you already pointed out. So the common green shank, the thing is like it has like an upturned beak, and the beak will be like quite thick. Here, it has like a very slim kind of a beak. So it only can be like a marsh sandpiper. Yeah. So next bird.
Spotted redshank.
Redshank.
Redshank, but which one? Common or the spotted?
So this is spotted redshank, thin beak.
Spotted red
Yeah.
shank.
So excellent. So it's like a thin beak, red legs. So it has to be like a spotted redshank. So very good. So this bird.
Black-tailed Godwits, sir.
Black-tailed Godwit.
Black-tailed, not a bar-tailed?
Black-tailed, sir.
Black-tailed, fantastic. So the tail is also very prominently visible here. Doesn't show any barrings. And the bar-tailed godwit will show like a slightly upturned beak, which is not there in this bird. The beak is quite straight. So it's like a black-tailed godwit. So this bird,
Hemmings Tenster.
Hemmings.
Yellow legs, sir.
Okay. That's one more bird
Short
which shows. It's a stint, that much is sure, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So,
Prominent yellow legs, sir.
yeah. So what about the markings on the upper body?
Oh, that's heavily marked.
Very prominent markings, right? So this
Yes.
bird here is
So
like a
little
long,
stint.
it's a long-toed stint.
Long-toed.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the markings on the upper body is another thing that we need to keep in mind, because the little stint and the long-toed stint will have like very prominent upper body markings, whereas the timming stint will have like a fairly plain kind of an upper body. So apart from the legs, we also need to look at the upper body markings. So this one here is like a long-toed stint. And this was photographed in Mangaljodi in Odisha. So this bird here.
Curlew.
Curlew.
Curlew. Yeah. So fantastic. All correct answers. So it's a
Gentle
curve
curve throat.
because the beak is fairly long, and it's almost like straight to a point, and then it starts curving. So it only has to be a curlew. So next is like so which bird is this?
Pratincoles.
Pratincoles. Yeah. So is this a small Pratincoles?
Not small.
Collared.
Collared Pratincole.
Collared.
Okay.
Stints
Why not
extend
the
Wing
oriental
is
Pratincoles?
stopping short of the
Collared.
streamers, sir.
Tail is lower, so it should be oriental.
Streamers are going beyond the wings.
The
Oriental
streamers
Pratincoles.
extend beyond the wingtip.
Oriental.
It has to
Collared.
be like collared Pratincoles.
Collared.
Yeah, so it's a very simple ID pointer. When the bird is in rest, of course, like when the bird is flying, there are other things that you can look at. But when the bird is at rest, the streamers, if it extends beyond the wingtip, it has to be collared Pratincoles. Long streamers. So the easy mnemonic that I have is like long streamers, collared. Collar has like two L's in it, right? So long streamers, collared. So that's how I remember it. So this bird here is like a collared Pratincoles. So thanks all for participating in this quiz. I hope it was useful for you, because Vedas is a very challenging field. I know for sure that there are several birds that I haven't included in this list for the sake of simplicity. I didn't want to confuse you beyond a point. But in the 1 hour that we spent here, we have clearly seen how to identify close to about more than 20 species, in fact. So it's a little tough to believe, but then I think 20 to 25 species we know confidently how to identify. So congratulations, each one of you. I hope you found it helpful. I look forward to hearing your feedback. And if you have any questions, we can quickly take a couple of questions. Else, we can take it offline as well.